Okay, so we're going to study something from O Yisrael, Rav Yisrael Salanter, the founder of the Mussar movement. He says to illusion, that evil enemy, it is, however, it's in our hands to distance it if we would only listen carefully to our seichel, rational thought, to calculate the benefit of sin against its loss. Because inevitably, why do we sin? Because we think there'll be some benefit. There is some benefit, but there's also a loss. And the loss is always greater than the benefit. Yet, he says, what can we do? The imagination is a strong river, and our seichel will drown. So we have a hard time, because what happens is, once our imagination gets the better of us, it twists our seichel, right? We start to rationalize. We all know people who rationalize, and we all rationalize ourselves, right, into doing everything we want to do. Unless, he says, we lead it in a boat. We have to have the seichel protected a bit from the imagination. What is that? Our feelings and our temper, meaning rikshas hanefesh v'sa'arat haruach. Now, this was Rav Yisrael Salanter's invention, that we need to become impassioned with doing the right thing. We have to have the words of ethics and morals and direction. They need to be part of us. They can't just be abstract thoughts and ideas, because when we get, life is alive. Life, we feel life. Life is essential, and ideas are very abstract. So that was his idea. So what he wanted us to do was to study the Torah in a way that it had an impact on us. So let's see what this means. What is this illusion that he's talking about? And the enemy that we're against, the inner enemy. This is the work of Mussar. Mussar is to identify and be able to overcome what we call the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is the evil inclination. So let's see what that is and how we deal with it. So now, comes along the Torah at the beginning, and it says in the Garden of Eden, now the serpent was the shrewdest of all the wild beasts that the Lord God had made. This is the Nachash, right? The snake in the Garden of Eden. We all know the story from our childhood. There was a snake, and the snake came and he said to the woman, did God really say you should not eat from any tree of the garden? And he entices Eve to eat from the tree. Now comes along the Seforno and he says, don't leave the Torah in your mind as a child, right? Try understand it on a higher understanding. What is the higher understanding? Who is this snake? Vahanachash. He says another word for the Satan or Satan, which itself is a way of describing the evil urge. Right? Who was the snake in the Garden of Eden? It was Eve's inner voice. It was Eve's evil inclination. And now he says, now the reason why the evil urge is compared to a serpent is, it's an analogy, is that just like a serpent, which makes itself as invisible as possible and yet causes much damage. So that's the Yetzer Hara. It comes, we're not always aware of it. It pops out of nowhere, and all of a sudden we want to do the wrong thing. the insidious nature of the evil urge consists of the fact that it conjures up in our imagination something desirable. So where Rav Yisrael Salanta before said it's the illusion, that's what it's using. It's using our power of what we Hebrews called dimyon. Yeah, it's the imagination, the illusion that there's something which, because of its desirability, we rationalize into considering as harmless, harboring no physical or spiritual danger for us. Actually, we think it's very beneficial. So that's the illusion that we are facing. Greed, lust, combined with one's imagination, is a powerful tool for leading man into sin. Um,
I guess I'm struggling with the word imagination. I'm not sure that's the right translation. In the sense that imagination presumably can be used for good and is a necessary attribute or faculty. I'm thinking it's more like negative emotion or the id or instinct, something different than imagination. It's more of an emotional force than a mental force. I'm struggling with the word.
Well, I think what he's trying to say, and this is what Rabbi Yisrael Salanta was saying, was, you can have a physical desire. You go into a store and you want something and you don't want to pay for it, right? You're not interested in paying for it, or you're not allowed to take it. And then you have to, the words come up in your mind, whether actively or passively, do not steal. And then you start to make rationalizations, right? So you're at a club or something, and they have some nice tennis courts, and you want to play there, but it's only for members. It's only for members. So then you start to rationalize, and you say, "Hang on a second. There's 6 courts over here. They're empty. If I use just one of them, first of all, I'm not going to take away I'm not causing any loss. Whether or not I play, that doesn't change the court. Number two, if members come, well, there are 5 other courts. They can use those courts, right? If 6 members come, I'll get off the court already. And even more than that, I'm doing them a toiva, I'm doing them a favor, because when they see people playing tennis, they're going to want to come and play tennis. So I'm helping them, right? So in the end of the day, right, instead of doing your avera, your sin, you'll end up doing some big mitzvah. So that process of rationalizing is what he's talking about. So I don't know if that's emotional. I think it's a very cerebral process.
Isn't it both though? Isn't it the appetite and then the rationalization to justify the appetite? It's both.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's more like appetite rather than imagination or lust or greed or hunger or gratification, unbound gratification.
Well, it's the it's this dynamic which he says over here, which because
Yeah. I get that. I've got a semantic problem, not a fundamental problem.
I don't know if I find it hard to call that greed. It's my thought process. It's the thoughts I'm having, of course, to justify my greed, right? Or to justify in that sense, I want to play tennis. I want enjoyment. I want fun. I don't want to pay, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So he's calling that, and I think we can understand that, just like I can imagine something, I can picture something in my mind which isn't yet, which will be, um, I can, with my thoughts, start to look at things from different angles, maybe, right? So just like, even if it's not imagining that which isn't yet, it's imagining that which is in a different way to how it is.
Okay.
And in that sense, I think it's the that's why this term. I'm not going to call it something else because um, he uses this word. He uses this word in the
Uses Dimayon originally, but then he changes it to other words.
he has other words.
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually he shortens it, but yes, okay. Um, so he says that greed, lust, combined with the person's, let's call it rationalization, power of rationalization, is a powerful tool to lead man into sin unless man is able to harness the power of reason against such insidious attempts to trick him into disobedience against God by giving into his desire for gratification of his senses. And later on, the same commentary, the Sforno says that that's really what the Yetzer Hara does. It tells us that the benefits that we'll get from our sins are great. And it causes us to forget or to justify or to rationalize away the loss that comes with it. Okay. Now, what do we do about this Yetzer Hara? How do we deal with it? What is the solution to, right, the enemy within? This is the enemy within. So the sages taught, and you shall place these words of mine in your hearts. This is from the Shema. V'samtem, right, I keep on doing that. V'samtem est hadavarim elu, right? You shall place these words. Now, one of the ways that the Talmud makes drushes, derives ideas from verses, is by using the words and a play on words. So the word v'samtem could be read sam tem. You divide it, and the sin can become a samach. So v'samtem, and place these words. The Torah is a perfect elixir. A sam is a drug, elixir, a medicine. Tam, tam is complete, perfect. The Torah is compared to the elixir of life. There is a parable to illustrate this. A person hit his son with a strong blow and placed a bandage on his wound. And he said to him, my son, as long as the bandage is on your wound and is healing you, eat what you enjoy, drink what you enjoy, bathe in either hot or cold water. You do not need to be afraid, as it will heal your wound. But if you take it off, the wound will become gangrenous. So too, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to Israel, my children, I created an evil inclination. So it's very clear, right? This evil inclination was something we were created with. I created an evil inclination, which is the wound, and I created the Torah as its antidote. So, right? Barati Yetzer Hara, I created the Yetzer Hara, or Barati Torah, Lo Torah Tavli. I created for it Torah as the spice, the antidote, the elixir to get rid of it or to avoid it. Um, if you're engaged in Torah study, you will not be given over to the hand of the evil inclination. As it's stated, well, right? As it stated, if you do well, shall it not be lifted up? Now, this verse, Genesis 4:7, um, is when Cain kills Abel. When Cain kills Abel, um, God comes and he says, "Where is Abel?" And he says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And God says, "The blood of your brother is calling out to me," and he becomes very downcast. Um, and before or after? Wait, sorry. This might be before. This is when Abel's sacrifice is not accepted. He becomes very depressed, and God says, "Be careful, kind. If you do well, it right shall it not be uplifted, or shall there not be upliftment? You will exceed. You will excel. Be elevated." And if you do not engage in Torah study, you are given over to its powers. It says sin crouches at the door. Moreover, all of the evil inclinations, deliberations will be concerning you, as it says in the same verse, and to you is its desire, and if you wish, you will rule over it, as it's stated in the conclusion, but you may rule over it. And that's what the Talmud says. The Talmud in Kedushin says the sages thought so difficult. Kasher, right? It's difficult. The Yetzer is so difficult that even its creator calls it evil. And it brings Yetzer Lev Ha'adam Ra Menu'urav. For the inclination of a man's heart is evil from his youth. And that's the verse in Genesis. Okay, so here we have this Yetzer Hara, this evil inclination, which is part of who we are. It's the lower part. We'll get into a little bit later what really is it. But yet, this is the inner work of man, right? To overcome the Yetzer Hara, in order to be a tzaddik, in order to be righteous, in order to do the right thing, we have to learn to recognize our inner inclination and then be able to overcome it. Okay.
Constrained vision of man.
Well, interesting. Okay, so Uri wants to say this is the constrained vision of man. People have a Yetzer Hara, and we got to deal with that, right? And how far can we get with people? So let's see. Let's see. Um, hmm. Okay, it's not here. But the Midrash says like this. It's in support of um, Uri and his constrained vision of man. The Midrash says like this, that on the sixth day, when God created the world, God says, "V'hinei tov ma'od." The world it was very good. And on all the other days, it just said tov. It was good. Um, so what's tov ma'od? What was very good about the sixth day? So there are many opinions. Then one of the rabbis says, what was created on the sixth day that was very good? Says that's the Yetzer Hara. It's the evil inclination. Which is why he says, because without the evil inclination, man will be idle, right? If man isn't driven for honor, he's not going to care, right? He's not going to do it for the right reasons. If man's not driven to be better than others, he might be lazy. So he says that's the Yetzer, the Tov Ma'od, what's very good, what makes the world go round, is the Yetzer Hara. And he says that, and he actually says in line with who's the economist, Uri?
Thomas Sowell.
No,
No.
he quotes the prior economist, the free market,
Friedman, Milton
before
Friedman.
that,
Oh, Adam Smith.
Adam Smith, right? Adam Smith, who said, well, if we let people be as selfish as possible, a free market, if we let the free market, it will self-regulate, right? The prices will be what they're meant to be. People will have what they're meant to have. It will be very good. So that's basically what this rabbi is saying, is that the Yetzer Hara is kind of necessary. It's not, okay. So now, here you go. Let's go on with that thought for a little bit. So the verse says like this: after the flood, God decides He's not going to bring another flood on the world, and that's right. He makes a covenant with Noah never to flood the world again, and he says after Noah's sacrifice, and the Lord smelled the pleasing odor, and the Lord said to himself, never again will I doom the earth because of man, since the devising of man's mind are evil from his youth. I understand man. He is ki Yetzer lev ha'adam ra menu'urav. The evil inclination is of a person. The inclination of a person's heart is evil from his youth. And therefore I'm not going to destroy the world again. So the Midrash says an outstanding thing. The Midrash comes along and says, and this is what's called Avot the Rebbe Natan. So what we're all familiar with Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers. But Rebbe Natan had his own whole book of ethical statements called Avot the Rebbe Natan. And he says like this: the Yetzer Hara is 13 years older than the Yetzer HaTov. Now, the Yetzer Hara is the evil inclination. The Yetzer HaTov is the good inclination, right? That's what God set before time, before Cain. He says, listen, it's up to you. Sin is crouching at the door, but you can overcome it. So, why does sin start 13 years before Yetzer Tov? While still in the mother's womb, the Yetzer Hara begins to develop in a person. Now, it's also a play on words. He's saying Yetzer lev Adam na menu'urav. The Yetzer Hara is young, is the inclination of a man's heart is evil from his na'ar, means the youth, yeah, or menu'urav, from when he starts to kick and come out of the womb. If he begins to violate the Sabbath, nothing stops him. If he commits murder, nothing stops him. If he goes off to another sin, nothing stops him. He's unrestrained. But 13 years later, the Yetzer HaTov is born. What's the Yetzer HaTov? When he violates Sabbath, it rebukes him. Airhead, or empty one, Rekan, right? Don't you know it says everyone who violates the Sabbath will be put to death. If he's about to commit murder, rebukes him. Ahead, empty one. Don't you know it says whoever sheds a man's blood, by man will his blood be shed. And if he's about to engage in sexual sin, it rebukes him. Empty one. Don't you know it says both the adulterer and the adulteress will surely be put to death. Well, what's that? That's his seichel. So the seichel, right, only develops much later. And that's really the idea of bar and bat mitzvah, of b'nai mitzvah, is they become what's called b'nai dat. They become people of intelligence, people of capable of rational behavior, and therefore become responsible for themselves. That's why b'nai mitzvah, you know, really you become obligated in the mitzvot when you can take responsibility for yourself. And so it's assumed, and it's interesting, right, in traditional thinking that women develop a little faster than men. So by 12, a girl is able to take responsibility for her own decisions for herself, and by 13, a man. So, came along Rabbi Hirsch, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, and he said, hang on a second, what's going on here? Are you telling me that you never see people under 13, boys under 13, girls under 12 doing nice things? Children are capable of the most beautiful mitzvot, right? Of the purest mitzvot. In fact, the Talmud says that the world is sustained on the breath of the words of Torah of children. Why? Because they're pure, right? They haven't engaged in such sins as adults. So he says, like this, he says, of course, people under 30, people under B'nai Mitzvah do beautiful mitzvot. But the difference is that they are unrestrained. So sometimes they'll do beautiful mitzvot, and sometimes they'll do beautiful averot sins. It just depends on what they want to do. They are not governed by rational thought. They are governed only by desire. So sometimes the desire is a good one. Sometimes the desire is a bad one. But when we become B'nai Mitzvah, we get something more. We get our rational ability, and we're meant to be governed then by rational thought. So, in the constrained view of man, that means that we use our Yetzer only for that which is good. Right? We channel, we direct our desires. So we keep them in check. We keep them in check. If we want something, we ask ourselves, well, is this permitted? Is this forbidden? And then we only allow ourselves to do that which is permitted. Yes, we should engage in business, and we should become the best, and we should seek honor, but only for that which is permitted, or to do it in a permitted way, as opposed to a forbidden way.
So maybe a synonym here for Yetzer Tov and the rational self is, in terms of psychology, executive function, right? Executive function only develops later in child development terms, but it's that overarching function of the mind that controls emotion and a whole lot of other things, mental faculties included. that as a concept, executive function is a very powerful concept in psychology, right?
Interesting. Yes, great. That sounds very good. Um, so, I want to go with this. Let's go to. mm, Okay, let's see this one because it's somewhat related. Um, okay, where did I want to go? Oh, okay. Yeah, let's see this and then we'll see, I think, what is a counter idea. Um, the Talmud says a very interesting thing. It says in the days of the, I think it was during the first temple period, Zechariah, the prophet, um, the people saw that there was a real big problem with idolatry, and um, they were able to do something to get rid of it, to get rid of it. When they saw that the evil inclination for idol worship was delivered into their hands, as they requested from God, the sages said, since it is an auspicious time, let us pray also concerning the evil inclination for sin and the error of sexual relationships. Let's, let's rid ourselves of this temptation. They prayed, and it was also delivered into their hands. Now, Zechariah the prophet said to them, see and understand that if you kill this inclination, the world will be destroyed, because there will also, as a result, be no longer any desire to procreate. They followed his warning and instead of killing the evil inclination, they imprisoned it for 3 days. So they told it to take a hiatus. Um, at that time, people searched for a fresh egg throughout all of Eretz Israel and could not find one. And stopped laying eggs, right? Since the inclination to reproduce was quashed, the chicken stopped laying eggs. They said, what should we do? If we kill it, the world will be destroyed. If we pray for half, i.e., that only half of its power be annulled, nothing will be achieved, because heaven does not grant half gifts, only whole gifts. Interesting. What did they do? They gorged out its eyes, effectively limiting its power and setting it free. And it was effective to the extent that a person is no longer aroused to commit incest with his close relative. Right? So it's a rather strange Gemara, but I think it um, it also shows that the this understanding of the Yetzer, of the inclination of people, is a necessary thing for the world, right? If we didn't have this desire, we wouldn't have children, right?
It also goes along with free will,
Meaning,
meaning that, it allows, God can only do so much. Humans have the ability to do what they think, and that can be good and that can be bad. And I'm sorry to say this, but it allows us to justify and understand people like Hitler and other people that have evil inclinations.
Well, I think I agree with you on one thing, I disagree with you on another, meaning we can understand the evil inclination, right? We understand that people are driven to do crazy things, right? And it could, yes, sin is sin. I don't think we can justify it though. I think the word justify is wrong because he knew better, right? Unless he was unable to overcome his own.
I think he rationalized to the height of rationalization. I think that I don't know, I read somewhere that he had a terrible experience with a Jew like before he even went to prison and in his childhood. And I think he just had this, I don't know, I can't get into his head, believe me, but I can think that someone to be that evil and live such an evil life, and even the Germans who they had to rationalize it. I once heard, when the guy said, it wasn't my fault, I just told him to go right. It wasn't my fault, I just told him to get on the the train. It wasn't my fault, I just so they rationalize it and can compartmentalize it to make it the evil inclination through free will. I personally see, to me, I'm going to say something.
Linda, does that equip them? Meaning, yes, you can understand it, but how? But does it make it? Are they not guilty?
No, no, it doesn't. You're just it's the inclination to be evil, but it doesn't free yourself from being guilty of doing it. It's just the way people can rationalize, when you use the example of stealing, or the tennis court that you used, you have to nip it in the butt right from the beginning. It's wrong. It's not, if it's for members, it's for members. And if there's a price tag, there's a price tag. And I think that people have to fight their evil inclinations in order to be good people. And I think that God and Torah and values and upbringing all has to come into play to alleviate these evil.
Yes, 100%. Right, 100%. That's what we're saying. That's the message. And
I agree completely. One time I went to the bathroom in one of the what do you call those places when you're going traveling, and I go into a stall to go to the bathroom and I see $150 crumpled up, like not crumpled, but folded on the floor. It fell out of someone's their pants, the pocket of their pants. And I came out and I said to Stephen, what do we do with this money? And he says, well, I walked around and I said, did anyone lose money in the bathroom? Did anyone lose money? I could not take that money because I did not want that money. I just would never. So I gave it to the manager of the place and I said, please, hopefully somebody will come back and get this money. So to me, I didn't know if the man was going to keep the money or if the man was going to ever find the owner, but I didn't want to have that on my conscience, that somebody would come back and want the money and not be there. So that's what I'm saying. I just feel like there's always going to be that evil inclination versus good inclination, and you have to do what you do, what makes you feel good.
Well, I don't know about that, because a lot of the time what people think is going to be good is not good. That's part of this rationalization. That's what the Yetzer Hara does. it tells you, well, this will be better. You won't get into trouble. Or the person, you could make 1,000 rationalizations why to keep that money, right?
But
Well,
that's the sickness of it. You the first time you gamble, and then you win, and then you go back and gamble, and you gamble and gamble and get it. If you nip it in the butt right from the beginning,
right.
in my that reminds me of
Right.
another. It gets worse as justification gets more and more as you do it more often.
Yeah, for sure. Right? That's what the Talmud says it. The Talmud says that the Yetzer Hara comes to you today and it tells you, okay, it's not so right, but whatever. And then tomorrow it comes and by the third day it's a mitzvah, right? You get addicted. You think that way. It changes your thinking. So yeah, it's a very, I like your advice. You got to nip it in the bud. You got to call it for what it is straight away, and you have to overcome it because if you let it in, it will grow. And remember, this is right. Says Benzoma here in Pirkei Avot. Benzoma said, "Who is mighty? Who is Ezehu Gibor? Right? Who is mighty, strong? Hakovesh et Yitzro, the one who subdues his evil inclination. As it says, Tov erech apayim migibor, or Moshe Barucho maloked ir. It says, he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that rules his spirit than he who takes a city. Right? So it's this is the main battle. This is the battle of life, to be righteous, to be good, to do the right thing, and to overcome your Yetzer, to overcome your evil inclination. Now, on the what's the opposite of the constrained, Uri? The
Unconstrained.
constrained. Okay. In terms of the unconstrained view of man, so Yisrael Salanta came along and he said like this. He said, look, the verse, Mishle is Proverbs. It says, Tov, better, Erech Apayim is someone slow to anger, Migibor. So he's better. He's even stronger than a mighty person. Or Moshel Barucho, and someone who has rules over his spirit, Miloked Ir, from someone who can capture a city, take a city. So he said there are two levels in the development of a person. First, you need to be erech apayim, slow to anger. That means that your anger is flaring. You're angry, right? You've been insulted. You don't like what's happening. So, Tov erech apayim. Good is it's good to be slow to anger. You have to overcome your anger. You have to use strategies not to express your anger. Right? Was a rabbi, and he used to have what he used to call his angry hat. What was his angry hat? That every time he got angry, he'd go and put on that hat. And he told himself, okay, when you wear this hat, you can be angry. And by the time he got to his hat, normally his anger had subdued a little. Or, he was angry and he was like, couldn't be bothered to get the hat, forget the anger. So that's the first level. But then, as a person develops, he becomes what's called a Moshel Barucho. Moshel Berucho, says Rav Yisrael Salanta, is when a person changes and a person develops into someone who has complete control of his spirit, which means he doesn't even get angry. He doesn't even get angry in the first place. So he had an interesting view of people, that he said, as we develop, as we grow up, we start off being constrained. We need to deal with our Yetzer, with our temptations. After a while, there will come a time when we actually are not tempted anymore, right? You know, you see that sometimes. You see that with people on a diet. People, you know, that are need to diet, and they start to diet, and then all of a sudden they become the fitness freak, you know, or the health expert. Why? Because they not only overcame their desire, they transformed it. They transformed it. They learned that being healthy and the feeling of being healthy is much nicer than the feeling of satisfying your needs, right? It's a purer feeling. It's a more uplifted feeling. It feels better to the degree that then the person isn't even inclined anymore to want to do that which is wrong. So that's an interesting view of character development, right? Is that, you know, you have people who are real, you know, balei tshuva, in the sense that they did something wrong, they realized how wrong it was, how bad it was, and then they become almost the opposite extreme, right? They become the people to lead, to speak about, to be you know, I think, not sure, but I think in addiction therapy, many of the best therapists are people who themselves have overcome addiction, because they know it so well, and they're able to do that. So we should all become like that, right? We should all overcome anger to such a degree that we understand it's so much better never to become angry. You know, we should overcome our lusts and our desires and our whatever it is that we live for, and we live on the level that we always want to do what is correct and right, and we're motivated by that, right? That's well, let's just go back to the beginning here. That's where Rav Yisrael Salanta called the being passionate about, right? The rikshat hanefesh, our feelings and our temper should be in line with our morality. Okay, now look at this chat. Everyone, Uri, goodbye. Everyone, goodbye. We'll see you next Monday. Thank you all.
Goodbye.
Wait a minute, Rabbi, your feelings and temper are aligned with your,
are aligned with what you know is right. You're excited about doing the right thing. It's not a bother, right? It's not, oh, I can't do what I want to do because I'm restrained. No, I want to do the right thing.
right, feeling and temper are aligned with what you know is right. I will not be here next Monday. Don't, I have the doctor's appointment.
Okay, you feel better. I'm so sorry about your whole thing. Crazy.
Thank you. I'm feeling better. I'm getting better. Thank you. And how was Bermuda?
Unbelievable.
Was it?
It's really one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to.